because they're like, I'm going to keep doing it. And especially when they get bigger, like if you want your,
Yeah.
2-year-old to get in the car seat, you can pick them up and put them in the car seat. When you want
Yeah.
your 16-year-old to get in the car, what are you going to do? You can't pick them up and put them in the car, right?
No.
So it's, it changes the game. And so you have to have that relationship to move them along. But that's why I feel like you're just negotiating with terrorists all day. And it's everything. Kids love to negotiate. Well, I want this instead of that. Well, I want six.
Yes. Okay. Welcome so much. Finally, the moment is here. I'm so grateful you're here today, and it's so nice to see your smiling face. How are you?
I'm good, Nicole. How are you?
I'm great. I'm just glad that we made everything work, and now we're on the roll here. And I'm so excited for this interview too. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you. Me too. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, I love your painting in the background. It gives me so much peace and calm inside.
That is its entire purpose. I love it.
It's perfect. I would love for you to give me a little introduction on yourself. Curious to know
Sure.
more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, I'm a Shetty certified life coach, which is probably the biggest pool I think that you guys have been pulling from, since many of us did that together. But I work with parents mostly, just to increase my impact. I think that then you have sort of a generational ability to connect and make change. So that is why I chose that niche. But I'm also a parent myself. I have 4 children, 3 of which are adults now, and I still have one at home. And they've had various challenges, and I think that that's given me a lot of life experience. Children are great at pulling out everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world, and showing it to you in a different way. So, I think that that's one of the beauties of having kids, is just the way that they make you really question everything and see things with new eyes, especially when they're little. Everything's new and has wonder. And so you get to experience all of that again as an adult, which is really awesome. So, for me, my biggest drivers in my life are making the world a better place and helping people. So I feel like using my coaching gifts to do that is the best way for me to make that impact. So yeah.
Wow. I love that. That's so nice. And what you said about like kids usually like bring out the kid in ourselves too. Like the kid that usually
Mhm.
gets forgotten when we grow up. I've
Yeah.
really seen that in people. Like when they get kids, they start, feeling allowed to, act a little bit not like a child, but more, like their creative side comes up and they play more. And I just love seeing that. It's so great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny how over time that ability to be playful and silly kind of
Yeah.
falls by the wayside. And it's nice to sort of rediscover the fact that you can still be that person. And actually it makes life more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that the moment we stop being silly and take everything too seriously, life becomes more boring. Like, yeah, for
Yeah,
real.
and harder
Yeah.
because laughter makes a huge difference, right? And that's why I think people love being around kids. Not always, right? All kids have issues and
Yeah.
struggles and times when they're screaming their heads off and you'd rather be anywhere than next to them. But but when you see the way that they look at the world, or
Yes.
when they're learning how to say certain things and they say it, kind
Mm.
of off, and it makes you laugh because it's so cute and funny, and they just bring that joy into your life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like you said, like seeing how they like see it from like new eyes,
Yeah.
gives so much perspective, definitely. Um, I would love to know, like, since we're the Fearless Women team here, I would love to know about you and your relationship to you, Fearless, and how that's impacted you.
Yeah. I think I looked up fearless because I wanted to see what's the like definition, right? And it's an
Mhm.
adjective that just means a lack of fear. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's not, I mean, I guess that's Webster's dictionary decision, right, of what they put in there. But I feel like it's more than that. Some of the similarities it said was like bold and it was bold and brave and courageous. And what I think I agree that those are similar to fearlessness. And I think that it's more about what you do through the fear and not letting it stop you than it is about not having fear, because I think fear is a natural thing. We all have fear. It's bred into us for, reasons of avoiding saber-toothed tigers. And, there's plenty of reasons and ways that fear can be really useful as a signal to us of how to keep ourselves safe. Um, you know, there are many places in the world where just being a woman is extremely unsafe. So our fear can, really be helpful in those types of situations. So it's not a bad thing to be afraid. I think it's recognizing with more of your maybe logic brain when to listen to that because it's an intuitive gut feeling versus when it's stopping you from doing something because you're afraid that you might fail or you might look silly, right? The reasons that are not survival reasons. Fear should totally be listened to, and it's a survival situation. Even if it seems silly in the moment, it's always better to be safe than sorry. But I think when it's not a survival situation is when we often listen to it too much. And so to me, fearlessness is about being authentic, being yourself, even when it may be uncomfortable, as long as it's safe, right? Because it's not safe to be ourselves everywhere. So knowing where it's safe to be truly and authentically yourself, and then bringing that whole self to everything that you do. I think one of the topics we had talked about was about negotiating salary and how women don't typically negotiate their salary, and how I think part of that is because of fear. So that's an area where you're afraid, but it's not a survival fear, right? It's just a confidence issue. So how do we make it so that women are getting what they're owed for and being paid at the same rate or higher based on their actual ability to do the job, right? Rather than this crazy wage gap that I know exists in the US. I don't know if it exists in other countries, but my guess would be that it does.
Yeah, I think it probably does in most places. And I love what you said about like fearless is not about not being afraid. I wouldn't say that it's the absence of fear because like you said, fear is a normal thing. Everyone experiences it, like at least in some points of their lives. And it's more of what you do out of the fear. Do you let it paralyze you? Or do you do something about it? Do you try to overcome it? Do you try to, even if it's scary, maybe take that step and see where it leads instead of, because I know that people also, like I also at one point in my life had tendency of when something became scary, I didn't see it as a challenge to grow. I saw it as a way of like, no, like this is not comfortable. I need to take a step back. I need to go into my cave and like hide. And that's kind of when we stop growing and we stop exploring ourselves, like figuring out ourselves. Like that's usually happens through overcoming our fears, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it because it is a signal, right? It's warning you, but sometimes we think it's warning us to not do something when actually what it's pointing you toward is that that's an area of growth. There's something there that you haven't delved deep enough into to resolve, right? And so why are you afraid? Is it because you think you might be embarrassed? Well, what's your relationship with being embarrassed? How can you change your relationship in being and feeling embarrassed, and how would that change your life for the better, right? Where else in your life does that fear show up? So like delving into those areas of what that's what our emotions all are. They're just signals, right? They're symptoms that something is underlying whatever that situation is, and it gives you that opportunity, just like you said, to delve into that and figure out what's underneath this. Why am I feeling this way, right? There's no tiger in the room, so why do I feel like I need to run away?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. So, you mentioned a little bit of why you went into coaching, but I'm also curious, like what's your niche and how did you come to figure out that that was your niche in the coaching
Yeah.
area?
No, that's a great question. So, the name of my company is the Parent Mentor. So my niche is parenting and helping parents. And part of the reason that that came up was I had multiple parents, but I had some that were really good and some that were just more absent. And I learned different things from each of them. And I
Yeah.
believe that every parent wants the best for their kids. They want them to be happy and healthy and, productive and be able to function on their own. I think that's a universal thing. Um, but what I think gets in the way is sometimes the way we were parented, the things that we haven't worked through ourselves. Like I said,
Mm.
your kids will find a way to push any and every button that you have to be pushed.
Definitely.
And they'll keep pushing it until you figure it out, right? And so some of that is
Yeah.
just skills, right? And we have a lot of things that teach you how to change a diaper or how to, feed a baby. Like we have these things for how to do things with kids, but we don't really talk about how you have to manage yourself, right?
Mm.
And part of managing yourself is that you have to know when you get emotionally, I don't want to use the word triggered because I think there's a lot that goes along with that term that's connected to that. But when you get emotionally activated, let's say, right, and you're like,
Yeah.
we're in a hurry, and this kid doesn't want to get their shoes on, and I know they're capable of getting their shoes on, and I think they're just doing this because they know I'm in a hurry, right? And they're trying to make me angry, and it's working,
Yeah.
right? And so it's some of it is about perspective, right? Like kids aren't actually thinking about you. They're
No.
probably having 8,000 thoughts in their head about whatever shoes, where are the shoes? Oh, I saw this toy. I want to play with this toy. They're not thinking what
Mm.
we're thinking, right? And so figuring out how to adjust your perspective and
Mm.
thinking about things from a kid's point of view, a lot of the things we don't learn as well is like, unless you're into childhood development, you don't really know when are kids capable of doing certain
Mm.
things? When are they actually able to understand what you're asking from them and
Mm.
do it? Right. And so we tend to think of
Yeah.
kids as being like just tiny adults who should be able to know all these things and do all these things.
Yeah.
And then we treat them that way. And it's not really a surprise when you think about it in those terms that it doesn't always work out the way we want it to. Right. So it's really about wanting to try and help parents to think of it in a different way so that um, really we can intersect that behavior in order to make it so that these generations of like, why do people go to therapy? There's
Mm.
almost always some component of the way their parents interacted with them,
Mm.
right? Attachment disorders, not having boundaries. Well, no one modeled boundaries. No one let me have my own boundaries. I don't even know what a boundary is.
Yeah.
All of those pieces come from the way that we're raised. And it's not our parents' fault. They didn't have the skills either. But if we want to stop that sort of generational trauma from continuing, then we have to insert into that process and provide those skills and those perceptional changes so that the kids that we're raising don't have those issues. And part of what brought me to that, besides my own parental upbringing, was being a parent and realizing I didn't have the skills and not
Mm.
responding in ways that I felt good about when my kids were struggling.
Yeah.
And my youngest is autistic. So, like, there's a whole new set of things to deal with and to figure out. And so, through that process, I've realized there's not a lot of support. Like, there's support for information, but sometimes there's information overload and it's not specific to your situation. It's such a large spectrum and kids
Yeah.
can be all over the place. And, just when you think you've gotten them through something, it'll cycle back and you have to start over. The things that you thought were working, don't continue to work. Or,
Yeah.
God forbid you have one kid and you're like, okay, we've got this figured out. And then you think the second kid is going to be the same and they're a whole different ballgame.
Mm.
And so it's like, you have one kid, you've had one kid, you know how to handle that kid, but then you get another kid and it challenges you in all these other ways because they're a completely different person, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think if you think about just living if you're living with another adult, think of all the complications that come with that. Now think of
Mm.
that person as not having any skills to do anything for themselves,
Yeah.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
difficult. It can be really challenging. It can also
Yeah.
be really rewarding.
I understand. And I can imagine that it's sometimes like sometimes you really have to go over yourself because sometimes you can get stuck in your head and like, is this something happening towards me? Is this happening to me? And you feel kind of like everything is just like falling apart. But I understand as a parent, you have to always think of your child and have to probably put the child before yourself as well, which I can imagine is really difficult when you've lived a whole life just taking care of yourself. Maybe of course take care of your family too, but everyone is usually like adults or something, so you don't have to have that responsibility. Now you're taking care of yourself, like your life, and also another one's life, and it's totally in your hands, kind of, which must be really challenging. And especially when you know that, like you said, relationships have a tendency to really like trigger you because it takes up stuff that maybe comes from childhood and stuff. And now imagine like a relationship with a child. That must be challenging. I don't have children of my own, but I can only imagine, because I also have this is not the same thing, but I have a little sister who I've been growing up alongside, and we have an age gap of 13 years, I think. So I've still been, I've still been kind of, in my senses when she came to life, and like seeing her grow up, seeing like all the challenges you face. And I'm like, wow, I'm like amazed by every parent out there that is doing a good job, that is doing the job that's needed, because it is a full-time job having kids, definitely.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and exactly what you're saying. And it's, on top of that, it's not just that that you have to do all of the physical things, right? But there's an emotional level of support that you provide as well. And there's modeling, and there's teaching, and there's listening, and there's understanding, and there's empathy, and there's all these things required that are, you don't have to do all of those things when you're just at work.
Exactly.
Like it's more than just a full-time job, and it never ends. And there's a large portion of single parents in the US, at least. I haven't looked at, obviously I'm from the US, so that's where most of my focus has been, but a large number of single parent households, more and more single dad households as well, which is always interesting. And it's, it's hard enough thinking you have to do this with someone who can, sub in for you sometimes, at least, right? When you need a break, or be like, hey, I think maybe you should take a walk, and I'll deal with the kid who's screaming for the last 20 minutes, right? Like being able to tap in and out really helps you reset yourself. But I think one of the biggest issues is that for single parents, especially, they stop taking time for themselves because they really try to give everything to their kid, but then they don't have the capacity, right? Because we're not in our own best place, right? It's like if you go to work after you were up all night, you're not going to get your best to that job either. But I think there's a lot of skills that you learn in parenting that are actually really transferable to the work world that a lot of people just don't really think about. Like I like to say, it sounds kind of strong language and hopefully not triggering language, but negotiating with your children is like negotiating with terrorists, because they don't care. And you can't force them to do anything. Like you realize as a parent that you listened to your parents at whatever rate, but you thought you had to at some point. And ultimately, at some point, you realized you didn't have to, that you could actually do really whatever you want. But then you had to deal with whatever the consequences were, right? And when your kid figures that out, you lose a lot of power, because they're like, I'm going to keep doing it. And especially when they get bigger, like if you want your 2-year-old to get in the car seat, you can pick them up and put them in the car seat. When you want your 16-year-old to get in the car, what are you going to do? You can't pick them up and put them in the car, right? No. So it's, it changes the game. And so you have to have that relationship to move them along. But that's why I feel like you're just negotiating with terrorists all day. And it's everything. Kids love to negotiate. Well, I want this instead of that. Well, I want 6 blueberries instead of 8 blueberries. Or, I want my toast to have no crust. I want like all of these little things, and they wear you down over time. But, so you have to learn how to pick your battles. You have to learn what really matters to you, what's really important in their development that you need to hold on to, and what things, can you give them some leeway on and let them have some wins.
Yeah.
right? Because nobody wants to live in a situation where they never get their way either.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Gosh, you give so much like input, and for me who isn't a parent, I still feel like if I was a parent, this would be so valuable to hear. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. I'm
Yeah.
really curious, like how did you discover your purpose? And like was there
Yeah.
any like obstacles on the way that kind of like got you there?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've always been someone who really intuited other people's emotions,
Mm.
probably from my own childhood trauma. I'm what I like to call jokingly a recovering people pleaser. So, I really paid attention, right? That kind of trauma where you have to pay attention
Mm.
to the people around you and what mood they're in. It I'm using that to serve me in order to
Mm.
serve others. So, I can remember even when I was little, like one time I was at a family gathering and my cousin, who was an adult at the time, she just seemed kind of off to me. And I could always sort of see that with my friends, but even with strangers, if people were acting in a way where it seemed like there was something emotionally, you know, off.
Mm.
Um, and I asked her in the middle of the family gathering, I said, "Are you okay? Like, really?" And she just started sobbing.
Oh.
It turned out that she had just decided she was going to get a divorce. Like, it was just a whole big thing, right? But no one else had even noticed.
Mm.
Another time I noticed my grandma was acting odd and I asked her if she was okay. And she told me she thought she was having a heart attack. So, these things can be really good
Yeah,
to notice, right? So
definitely.
it was, I think that was how those things started and developed. Obstacle wise, I think my personal belief is that the only true obstacle is yourself.
Mm.
Other people can make things really difficult for you and
Mm.
they can make you have to adjust and pivot and try a different way or get yourself up off the ground and try again. But really, it comes down to you. If you really want something, you'll make it
Mm.
happen one way or
Mm.
another and on whatever timeline it takes, right? But you're the only one who decides when you give up or if you give up.
Mm.
For me, a lot of it has been self doubt. Obviously, I'm not a perfect human in any way, shape, or form. I'm not a perfect parent. So sometimes, I'll catch myself saying to myself, like, why do you think, like, how are you going to tell someone, why they should get mentoring from you? Like, you don't know everything there is to know about parenting. You didn't study parenting. You're not like an early childhood development,
Yeah.
you don't have a master's degree or any degree in child rearing. Like, what makes you think that you're someone people should listen to? And the way that I combat that is that it's actually not my job to give advice.
Yeah.
My job is to listen, to validate what you're going through
Mhm.
because it's all valid, right? And then to help you, if I'm coaching you, my job is to help reflect back to you the areas that you're really struggling in because you know what you want and you know how to get there. It's just about being validated and told, like, it's okay.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing everything wrong, you know? And let's work on skills that could help you build the capacity you need in the areas that are bothering you. So then it's
Mm.
not me telling you, well, you did this and you did that and that's bad parenting and you should never do that. Like, I don't know your child and I don't know
Mm.
you, but I believe that your child is with you for a reason and you have everything you need to provide them the best parenting that they need for who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing with parenting is that I see that everyone is usually trying their best.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned the word perfect, and I don't think there is a perfect parent or perfect human or perfect anything. Like you said, like we're all just doing our best and having
Yeah.
support and guidance on maybe how to like some people are or some parents they get so frustrated, which is understandable, and they don't know
Yeah.
how to handle that, how to still,
Right.
you know, remain calm in those situations, for example. And it's so good to have, somewhere to reach out for help when that
Yeah.
occurs. Like I can just imagine like if I'm when I'm a first time parent, I will probably definitely want support and help and guidance. And if not from my mom, from a coach that can help
Right.
me, figure things out. Always like my
Yeah.
mom is always like the one who helps me, but I also know the value in having a coach and having someone who doesn't know anything about you, like any background, anything. They don't have any biases or anything to,
Right.
add to that. The only thing they do is they see it from a new, clean perspective, and their only goal is to help you. And that is
Yeah.
that is it is so cool about coaching that it really helps. Really does.
Yeah. Absolutely. And some people don't have other people in their life that they would go
Mm,
to for advice, right?
mm,
Or they might get advice and they're like, I don't see how that will work for my child, or that's not
mm,
really helpful, or I don't want to raise my kid that way. And what's great about parenting is that one, kids are really resilient, which is helpful.
yeah.
And two, like, you know, what really all of the research shows is that as long as your kids feel connected to you and loved,
Mhm,
everything else will find a way to work itself out. And
yeah.
so, it's really about what matters the most to you? Where are your sticking points, right? And then let's make a plan for how those things have consequences, those things you follow through on, those things you're consistent with, and how to learn to let go of some of other things because you cannot
Mm,
fight every battle. You cannot fully control another human being at any age.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. What would you say is like a common obstacle for women regarding, parenting and stuff? And like how would
Yeah.
you what is that like a tip you have of overcoming that obstacle?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we had talked about, I brought it up a little bit earlier. There's lots of things that
Of
parents in
course.
general deal with and that women, especially as parents, deal with. I think one of the biggest things is not being valued in the
Mm,
workplace.
mm,
And so I felt like that might be a really good place to talk about, you know, a lot for years, for decades, maybe longer.
mm,
Women who were coming back from raising children or even just on maternity leave, there's this sense that, they've been on some kind of vacation or, oh, now that you're finally ready to work again, just a lot of the attitudes
mm,
around women being of childbearing age. There's reasons why there's laws, at least in the US, about asking a woman about how many children they have. No one ever asks men how many children they have
yeah.
or if they're the primary caregiver for them.
Mm,
um, it's just not a thing that happens. It's assumed that women, one, will have children at some point, and that will somehow negatively impact their work.
yeah.
Um, but it's nice to see there's some adjusting happening. Like men are starting to get paternity leave, and so then I think that will help balance out that women and men both leave when they have a child, and that's becoming more normalized. I think would be good. But what I wanted to talk about specifically is that often women feel like they can, or what I hear them express is that they feel like they not just that they want to have it all, but that they have to have it all.
Mm,
And so there's this sort of push to like you have to be able to be the full-time mom, the full-time wife, the full-time friend, the full-time employee who works 80 hours a week, because we don't just work 40 hours a week in the US, right? Like we have to go above and beyond. We have to
yeah.
always be available to work. We have to always be available for our children. And what happens is then, and then everything in our Instagram feeds is talking about, self-care, right? And it's like, well, when, how? I can't
Mm,
be everything to everyone, right? And no one can be. So
mm,
what I think is interesting is that there's a lot of things about being a parent and a mom that, or the primary caregiver, that really lend themselves well to business, negotiating, whether that's your salary, whether that's in a meeting, um, talking someone into thinking that your idea is their idea, which is
yeah.
really useful with children.
Mm,
That's really useful, especially if you have a lot of really patriarchal people,
yeah.
or really strong personalities who won't listen to anyone else's idea or who steal your ideas.
Mm,
And being able to stand up for yourself, having boundaries, being able to model those for your children is very similar than modeling them at work.
yeah.
Being encouraging and supportive and kind, important in both places, right? And
Mm,
so those skills are really transferable. And I think a lot of times especially for people who have maybe stayed home longer, not than just like a maternity leave, but they've stayed home to, get their kids to like school age or something like that. And then they're trying to re-enter the workforce. That time is seen as being like a lack of skill building, but it's
Yeah.
really not, because you're building all of the skills I just mentioned, and those are all transferable. So knowing that and knowing that you are bringing that to the table and how that can be used in a confident way, I think is really useful. Also, there was I wanted to really quickly, there's a thing about, sorry, I wrote it down. So I talked about earlier, like negotiating your salary, which is a huge thing, right? So
Mm.
only 52% of men even negotiate their salaries, but 30% less women negotiate theirs. And what's
Mm.
crazy is that 87% of salary negotiations end in an increase in compensation.
Mm.
So
Wow.
if you do it, you'll be successful, right? But
Yeah.
there's this fear that sort of stops us. Like, well,
Yeah.
I really want this job and I don't want to seem like I'm difficult.
Yeah.
I don't want to look like I'm demanding more than I'm worth.
Yeah.
Right. And all of that comes back to this fear that they're just going to like take away the job. But
Mm.
that's not what happens.
Good.
So if you get a job offer and you say, let me think it over, right? Which is totally normal.
Mm.
And then you look at it and you think about, what here would be even better, even if it's more money than you're already making. Maybe you can negotiate a few more days off. Maybe you can negotiate, a half day on Fridays. Maybe you can negotiate a late, I prefer to work in a split shift, right? These are all things you can talk about that you can put into that negotiating process besides money, but you can ask for more money too. So the worst thing that happens is that they just say no and they say, this is our best offer. I've never heard of someone negotiating and having the employer say, never mind, you're asking for too much. We don't want you here.
Yeah.
That
That's
doesn't
so
happen,
no.
right? But that's the biggest fear, is that they're going to like pull that offer at all. And then you're not going to get anything.
Yeah.
And I think especially for women, a lot of the roles have been about, you know, I have to be the mediator. I have to be the one who doesn't rock the boat. I have to be the one who, takes what I get and doesn't throw a fit, right? And be grateful that you're offering me anything. And those are all, positive things in different areas, but not when you're negotiating a salary. You come to the table with strength and knowing what you're bringing to the position and what you're worth, and people will honor that and respect that.
Yeah.
So there's
I just
lots of options there.
yeah. I just have to say that I just love everything you're bringing right now. I feel like I don't even need to ask my questions. I don't even have any questions to ask because I'm just like listening and I'm like, wow, like this is so valuable. I hope that people are watching this because
Yeah.
I'm just amazed. You have so much to give and you're already giving so much value to this. And I don't know, I'm just like sitting here starstruck, like, wow, like this is such a because for me, like that I haven't reached that part of my life yet,
Yeah.
like about parenting, and I feel like I've learned so much right now that can help me when I actually get there, so I can just
Yeah.
guess that you have so much more as well to bring to the table. But I understand that we have a short amount of time as well, so I would just love to know quickly, like, do you have a client success story like that you would like love to share about? I'd love to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah. So I have a client who was really struggling. Her children were almost, like, she had one that was an adult and two others that were like sort of almost there, both in high school, one a senior, one I think a sophomore, if I'm remembering right. And she'd had kind of a rough divorce and there had been a lot of upheaval and just trying to figure out how to like reconnect with them. And one of the big struggles is that as your children age, the way you interact with them is really, it has to change too,
Mm.
right? So you're giving them little pieces of their independence, or sometimes they're taking chunks of their independence.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're ready for that and sometimes you're not. And so being able to know and walk that fine line, and it's a little bit different with each kid, when they need it, when they don't need it, some kids are more independent naturally. Other kids are more fearful of being independent and they feel better having you take care of things for them. So you have to sort of hold their hand while you walk them across the bridge of like, now you're going to be doing these things on your own.
Yeah.
And so we went through a lot of those processes and just, asking her, like, what is it that really matters to you? And, and I told her, I was like, I don't want you to tell me right now. I want you to really think about it and, decide what's really important to you. She had, one kid was really struggling in school and she was worried about what he was going to do, but he had a plan, but it wasn't academic. And so she was like, do I push him there? Do I not push him there? She has another kid that was really athletic and doing a lot of sports, but he seemed to kind of be backing off and, wanted to just coast because it was his last year in high school. And she was like, but that's going to affect your ability. Where do I push? Where do I not push? And really at those ages, a lot of it is about learning how to present an idea to your child in a way that they'll understand and will resonate with them, and then giving them the ability to make the decision, right? And when you start doing that when they're younger, where they get to make those decisions, they learn that what they choose has a consequence, positive or negative. And either things go the way they want them to or they don't, but they learn how to make better and better choices for themselves. And sometimes because we're so used to making those choices for them, they end up in a situation where they're an adult and they don't know how to make their own choices, and as their parents, we're like, well, we're not responsible for you anymore. So figure it out. And it's kind of late, right? So building that in was really useful. And she felt like through our conversations and through, me building up kind of her, reflecting back to her self-worth and that she is doing what's best for them and that sometimes she has to hold a line, like attendance at school, but other times she can be flexible about, it is up to you if you want to do sports. It is up to you if you want to go to college. It is up to you. These things are your choice, right? And some of those choices have longer term consequences, but, just because you didn't go to college, let's say right after high school, doesn't mean you're never going to go. A lot of people go to college right out of school. Some go later, some don't go until they're adults, right? And it's whatever works for you. And sometimes the thing that I always think is the saddest is like, if you take a scholarship and you go to college, but you don't really want to be there, you're not going to get the best out of that. And you're taking a scholarship away from somebody who really does want to be there.
Yeah.
So, for my children, I've always been like, if that's what you want, then let's find a way to make it happen. If it's something you don't really care about or you're not really interested in doing, then don't do it.
Yeah.
You feel like you want to just work, okay, just work. When you get to a place, or if you ever get to a place where you're like, I'm kind of tired of working, I'm kind of stuck. I realize there's this ceiling because I don't have a degree. Okay, well, now you've had more chance to be on your own and learn about yourself and figure out what makes it, what's interesting to you. So then you have a better idea of what you want to go be versus I think a lot of kids leave high school and they go into college doing what their parents think they should do.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
And who's excited about doing what someone else picked for you?
Exactly. And your excitement is definitely going to mirror into your grades and your like how you're like how good you're doing in school, because if you're not excited, it's like, of course you can study anyways, but you're never going to have your heart in it too. That's going to be missing, definitely.
Well, and it's a lot harder to prioritize the time to do things that you really don't want to be doing. Right. And a lot of kids go away to college. Well, now those parents who were trying to push you maybe or direct you to a specific major, they aren't right there telling you all the time to do it.
Yeah.
So now it's like, do I even want to do this? Right. How many kids change their major? A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that worked really well for her, and she felt like she kind of was able to reconnect with some of her kids that were a little bit older and hand off some of the things that she was also overwhelmed trying to make all these decisions for them, and being able to say, this one's really is your decision, and I'll support whatever you decide you want to do. And so that built some of that foundation for stepping into them being adults and taking on their own lives, really.
Yeah. Gosh, that's such an amazing story. I love hearing about that. I'm so glad for you as well that you had that experience.
Yeah.
It must have felt great to have that win as well for you and for the clients.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the best part about being a coach is that you get to see people have that relief, have those moments where they realize what they really want and what's holding them back, and being able to get past that. That's the
yeah,
best part.
yeah. I'm curious. I'm gonna start moving towards our final questions.
Sure.
And this is like, short answer
Okay.
questions. And one of them is like, if your life was a movie, what would the title be of that?
Mm. Uh, let's see. I think the title would be It's a bumpy ride, but it's always worth it.
Oh, I like this one. I love hearing this because I feel like it's like you don't have time to prepare for it. So it's just something like the first thing you think of that ends up being the
Right.
title. Maybe if I would give you like 2 or 3 weeks to think of it, you would have thought about it,
Right.
like gone back and forth. But now it's just like the first thing you think of, and I love that. So it's very
Yeah.
nice. And
Thanks.
I would also love to know, do you have like 2 or 3 fearless women that have inspired you throughout your journey?
Yeah. You know, there's definitely more than three, but the three that come to mind the fastest, I guess. Brene Brown is always like my number one person. I don't know if everybody knows her, but she's a shame and vulnerability researcher. She's an amazing woman. She's written a ton of books. And one of her sign offs is stay awkward, brave, and kind. And I love everything that embodies. And she just has a lot of really great research backed information that can really, I think, connect people who normally wouldn't feel connected.
Yeah.
So that's one. Two is Oprah. I think that I recently read her, or was it reading or watch? I don't know. I saw something about like kind of her childhood and where she sort of came from and how she ended up, being a talk show host and everything. And she went through a whole lot of adversity. And I just think she's so in herself and so
Mm.
confident. And I'm sure that was not an easy place to get to. And I'm sure it still probably bothers her at times because I don't think any of us ever get to a place where we're just fully confident and have no doubts.
Yeah.
But I just think she's amazing. And I think, especially in a case of representation, because it matters so much, being a Black woman, I think she's put up with so much and
Mm.
she's come through so many situations. And I think she's amazing. I think that she's very supportive and very embracing and uplifting to other people who need, help being uplifted. And I think that
Yeah.
she just amazes me every time I hear something from her, every time I listen to her or watch her. I just think she's amazing. And then last but definitely not least would be my mom. She's actually my stepmom, but she had polio when she was like 3, and so she went through a whole lot of things. And she just was one of the most fearless and strong women that I ever got to, physically see and grow up with and be around. And it really impacted the way that my life has gone.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Because if anyone would ask me the same, I would also say my mom. Like every time. Like she is
Yeah,
the one that's impacted me the most in every possible way. And yeah, moms are very special. They're very
yeah,
special. And
they are.
that's why you and as other moms out there, like you're doing a great job. Like,
Oh, thank you.
I mean, just seeing that, like, there's so many that gives up, which I know, and that can't be an easy choice either. But
Yeah.
just seeing how many that, stays and doesn't give up and that keeps going every day. They go to bed and they're exhausted, and then they wake up the next day
Mhm.
and they're just like, let's do it again. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It's just amazing. I think moms are really amazing. And I'm so
Yeah.
so so grateful that you're probably a very busy person too, and you took your time to be here today. And I don't know, I'm just so grateful. And I know the Fearless Women team is also very grateful for your time.
Honored to be
Um,
here.
yeah. I have a question now that I realized I haven't asked you. Do you prefer
Sure.
Nic or Nikolai?
Either one is fine. Doesn't matter.
Oh,
A lot of people can't say Nikolai for some reason, or they read it wrong. So going by Nic is easier. That's all.
oh, okay. It's fun when I saw your short name Nic, and then I was like, oh, Nic, Nicole, that's gonna be a great interview. This.
Yeah, I actually dated a Nicole for a while, and that was really funny because every time somebody would start to say a name, we'd both kind of turn, and then I'd be like, "Okay, you're talking to her." It was great.
That's so funny. Yeah, I'm. Oh, now when you're saying it, I actually dated a Nikolai. This is really
See?
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, we didn't have that problem though, so.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I had a blast today, and I learned
Me
so
too.
much from you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so thankful for being here, and thank you guys for including me and allowing me into the sacred space of women and being able to be an advocate and an ally for you guys. I think it's really important. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. I'm just so glad you wanted to. And hopefully we'll see more of you in the future as well.
Yeah, I'd love that.
That sounds great. Okay, have a really nice day now, and I'll see you in the future. I'm pretty sure we'll see each other again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.